Growing up, when no one else was around, I honestly used to just cry. As awful as it sounds, I really just could not figure out why I hated myself so much. And this was not a normal thought for someone 12, 11, 13, 14 years old to be thinking. I'd look in the mirror and feel like there was a damn stranger staring back at me, like there was a complete disconnect between how I felt and what was staring back at me. The best way I can explain it is I just felt so wrong and so awkward and so uncomfortable in my skin. In middle school, I was just one of the boys, and then come high school, I was captain of the girls' volleyball team, wearing eyeliner and dresses to the school dance. But when I was alone, not a single bit of this felt real. It got to a point where I just needed answers. I hyper-feminized myself desperately in high school in an attempt to just fit in and be normal. But again, it felt like I was living a lie, putting a mask on, and living as a person that didn't feel like myself. It got to a point where I would look around at my peers, girls, boys, whoever, and thought, why is no one else experiencing this? This was the first time I knew something was different. I even convinced myself that maybe this is just what growing up feels like. But it wasn't. This was dysphoria, this was disconnection, and this was so much more than just growing up. And to be quite honest, this was the beginning of everything changing for me. This is my story from going to a confused teenage girl to a confident transgender man who helps other members of the LGBTQ+ community build their dream bodies through fitness. And fitness plays a much bigger role in this story than you might think, so keep watching to learn a little bit about how that is so it can help you too. So if you resonated with that little snippet of my story, or you're just questioning your identity in general, I hope that some part of this story gives you the language, courage, or hope that I never had. So let's back it up a little bit to my childhood. Growing up, I was always the tomboy. I actually grew up with an identical twin sister, and we were both tomboys growing up in the 3rd, 4th, even 5th grade. I always found myself playing outside with all the boys on my block. I even remember at a point I tried out for the boys baseball team in my town, and I was the only girl at the time to try out. And this was a pretty common experience for me, being the only girl playing basketball at recess, or being the only girl that wanted to shop in the boys section for back to school shopping instead of the girls section. I never connected the dots with little things like that growing up, but it plays a huge role in my story. Like I said, growing up, I had an all-guy friend group. I played the drums, I was living at the skate park and doing all these quote-unquote boy things. And at the time, being a kid, I love looking back at it because I thought nothing of it. At this point in my life, it just felt normal, and I didn't attach it to gender because I honestly didn't even know what gender was at that point in my life. So of course, by my family, friends, teachers, and everyone around me, I was labeled as the tomboy, but that didn't really have a negative connotation for me. I was completely fine with that. And in all honesty, these were some of the last years for a while that I truly felt at ease in my body. And I think it's a really cool concept. The authenticity that comes with childhood is something I really, really admire. And there were so many years where I was living a lie, and these were some of the most authentic years of my life. I always remember growing up picking the boy characters in video games, wanting to be the dad or the dog when we played family or house, and little things like that. I was always drawn to that more masculine side of things growing up, and that was completely normal for me, something that I just kind of grew into. And my twin sister at the time was doing a very similar thing. But then we get into middle school, and that's when things started to change. She started to find her femininity a little bit more and grow out of that tomboy phase, you know, and I'm over here like, what the hell is going on? I'm like, oh, we're growing out of this now. And I tried to get all my ducks in a row and hyper-feminize myself as well. So middle school was a little bit of an awkward period for me. It was pretty much the same thing. I was the tomboy, but I kind of kept to myself, kept quiet, and was that awkward, shy kid that just kind of did their schoolwork all through middle school. So I coasted through middle school with a similar vibe to my childhood. Then high school hits. This is where things really changed for me. High school is daunting for every individual. For me specifically, I knew something had to change. I knew I could not be the kid with the Mario backpack, wearing the long jean shorts and the collared shirts to school, because that wasn't what girls did. And I remember little moments like people would come up to me and ask me if I was gay in gym class, and like there were little things like that. And I always found myself being so competitive with guys around me, always wanting to beat them in sports, be better than them, and things like that, in a way to feel significant and maybe euphoric and connect to my gender identity, which of course I didn't know at the time. And honestly, I did not receive any negativity during this time. I felt a huge sense of belonging, but I was not aware yet how fragile this comfort was. Here's when high school hits. In a desperate attempt to fit in, I completely hyper-feminized myself. I started wearing leggings, short shorts, dresses, things along those lines. I never did anything as far as experimenting with makeup or dating boys or anything like that, but I would fit in as much as I needed to kind of just coast through with no questions asked. As I'm sure all of you are painfully aware of, social pressures kicked me in the ass going into high school. Sports and being athletic, like I said, was always something that came very, very natural to me. Like I said, I would always compete with the boys, try to outrun them, outcompete them. So the first thing that came to my mind was joining a girls' sport in high school. So I became captain of the girls' volleyball team in high school and also did club volleyball outside of that as well. This was my safe space. Moving my body, being athletic, and having something that I was naturally pretty good at allowed me to fit in socially much easier. Because in all honesty, I was one of the best people on the team at the time. So socially, I never felt like I could get along with girls or connect with them like everyone else did. You know, these little cliques that were happening, I felt completely iced out of them. So having that little level up of being the captain of the team and, you know, a decent player on the team allowed me to make friends a little bit easier. So for that volleyball, I thank you. But also at the time, becoming captain of the team amplified the visibility of myself and the pressure as well. It was a lot socially for me and it was exhausting. I felt like I was putting a mask on. The double braids, the spandex, the cheers, it really just was not my thing. When I was on the court, when I was playing the game, I loved it, but everything outside of that just felt like I was living a complete lie. At this point, I was simply just trying to mirror what other girls were doing. They started talking about boys, I would start talking about them too. And I even remember like picking boys to have fake crushes on that I wanted to look like, because at the time, I just thought I was a late bloomer. I was like, I don't know why I'm not liking any boys. I wasn't liking any girls either at the time. Sexuality was just something that wasn't on my mind. At this point in my life, the last thing I thought was, oh, I'm trans. I just thought, hey, maybe I'm socially awkward. Maybe I was raised a different way than everyone else. There were so many things going on in my mind. Me considering that I was transgender was definitely not one of them. Again, I simply just thought this was teenage discomfort, and I thought that for so long. It got to a point where there was this intense internal pressure of, oh, everyone thinks I'm this confident, athletic girl. But I didn't feel like a girl, and I didn't feel like anything, honestly. At this point, this was the first time I ever experienced dysphoria. I didn't have the words to connect the dots here, but this was the first time I truly experienced my first bits of dysphoria. At this point, I had no space to silently discover or explore or even work through this. So I honestly just buried my head in athletics and school and struggled silently. And these were some of the hardest years of my life. But to be completely real, I knew I couldn't suppress these feelings forever, and there would be a point where I had to start openly thinking about what was going on inside my mind. And that point was COVID. April of 2019, when we experienced the lockdown. Everything stopped. Social life, school, athletics, and most importantly, distractions. That's what all those things were for me at the point. This left me stuck in my room for months with nothing but my own thoughts. So you can probably tell where this is going. I remember trying to do the same thing of desperately trying to stay productive in an attempt to bury these thoughts and suppress them even more. And that's when fitness fell into my lap. At-home workouts were one of my go-tos in terms of my routine. I would do my online school, and then I built out a little workout routine to keep myself productive throughout these times. What's important to note here, though, is I started building up some fear around my gender identity. The more I prolonged the discussion with myself, the more it became prominent in my days, the more the dysphoria got worse, and the more I would honestly just have outbursts of emotions like frustration, anger, sadness, where I would just be crying in my room at night for unexplainable reasons that I now know were dysphoria. I started asking myself deeper questions like the following. Why, when I look in the mirror, does it not feel like me? Will this feeling ever go away? Do other people feel like this? And then my mind would just spiral from there. I felt so alone when I came to this realization. I was like, I had no role models, no other queer people or trans people in my life, and I had no idea what to do with this realization. In a way, it honestly made things worse for me. Now that I had the answer of dysphoria or sexuality or that confusing topic, I was like, well, now what? And again, that's when fitness started playing a huge role for me. It felt like I was in this waiting period of my life, waiting to come out, waiting for it to be the right time, waiting to learn more about these things. And online was also a huge outlet for me to learn more about this in silence. So I remember starting to follow queer and trans creators and slowly but surely learn about the community and learn more about myself. And this is when I heavily turned to fitness as a way to have more control over the things that I was experiencing. But this is not with me transitioning in mind. This is simply just to build confidence. But let me be clear, at that time, I did not know what the hell I was doing. Started following like Alexis Ren and Chloe Ting ab workouts. For a few reasons. One, that was the body type I had. That was the type of content and media that was shown to people like me. And all the girls were doing it at the time. It was literally like the thing to do were these ab workouts. At this same time though, I was secretly idealizing cis male bodies in other forms of gym content and thinking to myself that I wanted to look like that. But I honestly did not know if I could. So that's where I got caught between two extremes. Doing workouts for a body that I didn't really identify with, while dreaming of a body that I wasn't even sure I was allowed to want. There was no one at the time that I personally found that was speaking to people at the same starting point as me, wanting to look the way that I wanted to look. I felt like I was completely alone in this. And don't even get me started on the nutrition side of things. That was way worse. All the advice was completely gendered: bulk, build muscle for men, cut, tone up for women, and I just did not fuck with any of that. So then I was stuck thinking, what do I eat? What do I train? And is it even possible to change the way I look without things like hormones or surgery? And let me be clear, at this time, I was not thinking that I was trans or transitioning at all. This was subconsciously something that I was just doing, thinking that it was completely normal and that there was nothing to do with gender here. This period of my fitness journey can be symbolized by a few things: overtraining, under-eating, no structure, and no guidance. Honestly, just pure trial and error fueled by desperation and dysphoria. But slowly, in the midst of that pain, I started to create something new. A version of myself that when I looked in the mirror felt slightly more aligned each day, even bringing a slight smile to my face when I looked in the mirror. This was the earliest moment of euphoria that I ever experienced, and that earliest moment was the gym. Around this time is when I came out as a lesbian. At this point in my life, I started realizing my sexuality and that I was attracted to girls. And at this point in time, I was being presented with identities like a masculine presenting lesbian and things along those lines that I thought could be the answer to these questions I've been asking myself. Now, it didn't feel fully right, but it was much easier to explain, and it allowed me to put off my transition for honestly 5 or so years. As I explored more and more, I eventually came out as non-binary shortly after. Coming out as non-binary gave me the space to breathe, honestly. It felt so much more expansive, and this was not just sexuality, this was also gender identity. So I started going by they, them pronouns, and this was a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people in my life. I remember feeling like such a burden, honestly, and feeling that this pronoun change was such a huge deal. How I like to explain my days as non-binary: I was non-binary for I think 3.5 years of my life, and it just felt okay. The dysphoria wasn't as debilitating. People were not using she, her pronouns on me. People were using a more neutral pronoun, but the feeling was exactly that, neutral. I didn't feel euphoric. I didn't feel empowered. I didn't feel like me, but I felt okay. And okay allowed me to coast through a majority of my high school years as just that. Now, this felt a lot closer to the truth, but I always knew I wasn't there yet. I remember in high school, my past partners and friends, I would say things along the lines like, I'm pretty sure I'm trans, but I'm not gonna go there yet. I would literally joke around about transitioning years before I even came out as trans. And if you feel the same way and you've been scared, you're not alone. So then there was this slow awareness that non-binary just was not the end of the path for me. It felt like I was compromising almost. I was just picking something in between fully transitioning so that I could compromise for the other people around me. And it honestly just felt like the safest option for me. I soon realized that I had honestly started mentally and socially transitioning to a male before I even said it out loud. Past partners would always call me boyfriend. Sometimes they would use he, him pronouns for me here and there, but it was never anything official and never anything I talked about with parents or anything along those lines just yet. But just know it wasn't like I flipped the switch, came out as trans, and everything changed. There was honestly a little bit of gray period in my non-binary days where I would have certain people experiment with certain boundaries to test what felt good. And I remember the first time people started using he, him pronouns for me, I lit the fuck up. I was like, this is it. And there were two very polar opposite feelings. Oh my God, this is what I've been searching for years, and this is my answer. But also, oh my God, this is my answer. What this entails is name changing, coming out to parents, testosterone, surgeries, things like that. So it was such a unique and bittersweet feeling, honestly. And if you felt that way too, that is okay. I was not the type of person that knew I was trans since I was 6 years old. It took me till I was an adult, 18 years old, to socially and emotionally and even medically come out as trans. I now identify confidently as a transgender man. I have started HRT. I am getting top surgery in a little less than 3 months, which is really fucking exciting. I've changed my name. I built a new relationship with myself. One rooted in authenticity, not performative confidence. And through all of this trial and error throughout these years, I found myself back to the same feeling I felt when I was a kid, and that tomboy, which I think is so beautiful about a person's transition because in a way, it came full circle for me. Now, why fitness is so important to me is before all of these things, like starting T, planning out top surgery, changing my name and all of these things, fitness allowed me to feel so much more comfortable in my identity before I even knew what my identity was. What I mean by that is when I was non-binary these 3 years, this is when I really started getting into lifting, started posting my content, started taking nutrition seriously, started learning more about training and what muscles felt euphoric and masculine for me and how I could build them up as an AFAB individual. Fitness was my outlet. In this waiting period when I was too scared to come out, too scared to start HRT, or just didn't even know who I was, who is Grayson, fitness was there for me like nobody else ever was. When I couldn't even stand up for myself and what I needed, fitness was there. The reps, the sets, the repetition, all of it was so empowering for me in times of desperation, dysphoria, anxiety. Fitness was my rock, and that is now my goal, to allow it to be a safe space for others. I will die on the hill that fitness is a form of gender affirming care. It has been the most valuable piece of my transition. Being over a year on T and so many other things medically, this has been the focal point that has changed the trajectory of my transition. It's fitness, and there is no point in which you need to start it. I started fitness before I even knew what being transgender was, and it gave me the stepping stones I needed to come out, to feel better in my body, and to start things like testosterone and top surgery in full confidence with who I was. Building a body when I looked in the mirror that I connected with before even starting T and before getting top surgery is something that I feel everybody should use, because this is what got me through the trenches of my transition. Again, it wasn't easy for me to figure this out, so I took everything I learned through trial and error. How to navigate nutrition in a healthy way, how to navigate it with hormones and being on HRT, and that's what led me to build Masculinity Made, the program I wish I had when I was 18. It's for trans men, masculine presenting women, gender non-conforming people, any AFAB or LGBTQ+ queer individual that wants to build their confidence back pre-T, pre-top surgery, whatever step you're on in your journey through fitness. We focus on training, fueling, and reshaping your body in a way that feels safe, affirming, and effective. As of today, I have helped over 1,000 LGBTQ+ individuals build their bodies, build their confidence through fitness. And saying that, I know, makes my younger self proud. But it's more than that. I've helped them feel seen, not to others, but within themselves. This journey is not just about losing or gaining weight. It's about building a version of yourself that you actually want to live in. We have one body, and we're damn stuck with it, as much as it can suck sometimes, but we're gonna use our story, use these emotions, and use these challenges to work 10 times harder to get to where we wanna be. Because if no one's told you yet, it's possible. So if any part of my story resonated with you and you're wanting some guidance to feel confident in your body as well, I invite you to check out the link in our description, learn a little bit more about Masculinity Made, and maybe even join us. If not, I hope you got some value from my story. Thank you all so much for watching. And if no one's told you, regardless of what step you're on your transition, you are loved and you deserve everything, and you deserve all the successes and support life has to offer. You got this. Peace.